As you may know, my name is Amy Roche, and I'm an instructional designer within Teaching and Learning with Technology, supporting shared programs, and I started in April, so I'm relatively new to this role. Today, we're going to be talking about creating seamless student experiences and how to kind of ensure a sense of community among students, especially if they're not at the same campus location. This is something that kind of has bubbled up from these shared programs, and I've had experience for adult learners and through informal sharing for many, many years, actually a decade now, which is pretty amazing. So I also have with me Julie, which we had introduced before, and our agenda for today is kind of why do you take the time to establish community? Maybe you might be teaching some type of discipline where there's not a lot of discussion, so why would you do such a thing? Then how you can establish it early and often, and how to continue that throughout the rest of the semester. Then we're going to talk about what are the variations of student culture and preparedness, if there are any, and why address them, and then ways to overcome them. And then lastly, because this is the last session of the e-learning series, you might be saying, okay, well, some of these ideas are great, but where do I go from here? So you are going to touch base a little bit about how you can get additional course support, a new endeavor called TLT Reach, and other services that Julie and I, and now Marilyn, will provide. So we have a question for you. Why should I focus on establishing a sense of community among students? Is there anybody brave enough to answer?
I think it enhances the learning is what I think. I think if people feel connected and they feel part of a community, then I think they stay in the class, they are connected, and then I think that enhances the outcomes.
Yeah, great. Especially if they're in the same program. And for us, we tend to work on 300 and 400 level courses. So that's even more important in those within your discipline, maybe versus gen eds. But even gen eds, it's really important. It helps get people, the quiet individuals, to talk and contribute a lot more, etc. So great. Anybody else?
Well, I think in a learning, students can learn from each other too, just their contributions and different people sharing and building. I mean, I guess that touches on what you were saying, Roxanne, about, it enhances learning, but I think people learn from each other.
Yeah, great, fantastic. So some ways or reasons why to establish community. There is a whole thing called community of inquiry, which is more so for online learning, but it shows the research and benefit to having a community of learners and working together. And then another one is if it works for first year seminar, what about upper level courses? So I'm going to talk about how making connections within the first 2 weeks for first year seminars helps them feel connected to the university, and they're more likely to stay if they make those connections in the first 2 weeks. And two, there's other ideas and research that it shows even for other courses, it helps with persistence and retention. And then two, which was just touch base upon by Roxanne, is building a community of learners equals fostering learning and contribution and everything else. And in the text chat, we have a few things. Oh, it was Penelope. So thank you, Julie, for helping her with the audio. And Margaret says that students are more invested in the class if they see themselves as part of the learning community. Yeah, so great. Thank you for that. In addition, why establish community and shared programs? The whole aspect and purpose of shared programs is to provide a seamless student experience and to provide the same engagement opportunities, whether you're in front of the room of who you're presenting with, or if they are at a distance. So our first question, and I want you to talk in small groups. We're gonna have the online participants type in the chat, and then here we'll talk and we'll mute. So identify a way you could connect to students in a shared course who are not physically at the same campus. How would you connect to students who are both here and at a distance? So I'll give everybody about 2 minutes, and I'm gonna mute on our end, so that way you can't hear us chatting away. Okay, so I think we got some good discussion. I'm going to touch base on is anybody at the online audience, I could see the chat, but not those in the room. So does anybody want to kind of further explain what they had typed? Feel free to unmute and share. No one? We got a shy crowd. That's okay. Hal is from IST at New Kensington. He joined a little bit late, which is fine. Thank you, Hal. And he says he has a great idea for video conferencing classes, and it's to take a few minutes at the end of class to meet, especially with the remote location, and have the students who are in the room with you leave, and that way you're talking just to them and maybe having some issues, or maybe that they might not have heard something that you had during the class because of audio things, and they could ask those and address that in a more one-on-one type of way. It's a great idea. Another one is more so for the online component, and whoops. And for this one, Veronica says foster discussion in online discussion forums. Make instructions or similarities between the students to encourage them to talk to one another. So if you do discussions online as part of a video conferencing course, students might reply to people who they know and see more so in person versus on the screen. So encourage that dialogue, and maybe the rubric says that you have to connect to somebody at the other location. So that's a great idea. And then another one from Margaret is if the instructor partnered with me or with another student at a distance location for a project, that you would be extra motivated to interact with him or her. So those are all great ideas. So here we had one small group. Is there anybody willing to kind of share out what you've discussed?
No. I can just express what actually it's Roxanne's idea of it, just to team people up. That was one,
Yeah.
and that kind of echoes what the other folks are saying too. It's just for group projects or require like a kind of teaming up across. I think that's a really good.
That's fantastic. And I know that we have some people who've been to all the e-learning series and some people who haven't. So with group projects, you can take the easy way and just have some groups where you're at and then other groups at any remote location. But for Rehabilitation Health Services, between Hazleton and Wilkes-Barre, we have, Wilkes-Barre has a lot less students. So for every 2 students at Wilkes-Barre, they're paired up with 4 students at Hazleton, and they're working on a group project together, and they literally are having the group project presentation start later this afternoon. And we worked with them of how to get the technology for those 6 students to present together. So we have an interesting take on that. So we'll see if it works.
Wouldn't even know how to visualize that.
Yeah, we'll share that afterwards.
Yeah.
So here I'm going to pass it over to Julie, who was not able to make it in person. So Julie, I'll progress the slides and go ahead.
Okay, do you want me to put my video on? Because it looks like you stopped it. It's up to you, I don't care.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was trying to mute you because somebody was typing.
Yeah, so I think it says you have to start my video.
Oh, I'll do that, so go ahead and start talking.
Okay. So as you all know, Penn State is not just at University Park. We have 24 locations throughout the Commonwealth. Oops, okay. And so one thing we've been trying to encourage faculty and shared programs to do is think about the commonalities and the institutional resources that can be used by any Penn State location. So some of the resources that students can use in shared programs, like I said, that are available for every campus, include the Penn State libraries, resources and trainings from SITE, which is the Schreier Institute for Teaching Excellence. The consultants there help and do trainings for faculty at any campus. Centrally supported technologies and resources that are available for shared programs and provided by ITS and TLT. Because Amy and I, and now Marilyn, our positions are shared between Commonwealth campuses and TLT, so we can bring some of those resources to the shared programs. So in the face-to-face classroom, Amy and I have witnessed this as we've been working on our REACH project, which we'll get into a little bit later. But if the instructor doesn't provide an opportunity for students to connect and work together, it doesn't happen. I mean, students have a lot going on, and you really need to help them to have a meaningful reason to connect with the students at the other campus. It's also very important, and Amy will get to this a bit later, to take time during the first week of your class and really help them to get to know each other and, do some introductions, do some icebreakers, and just help everybody to feel connected. So some examples that we've seen, as I said, working with the REACH project, is that if the campuses are nearby, that provides some opportunities for face-to-face meetings. So, for example, you can see on the map there Wilkes-Barre and Hazleton. They're very close in terms of location. And so the faculty member there that's part of the RHS program had a guest speaker come to Wilkes-Barre, and then using a university vehicle, transported the students from Hazleton to Wilkes-Barre. There are a couple reasons for that. One of them is that the students at Wilkes-Barre don't have the instructor there very often. He is scheduled to teach a course immediately following the shared course that's delivered via Polycom. So he thought it would be nice to kind of give those students the opportunity to feel like, hey, we're gonna have an event here and host the students from Hazleton, and giving them that opportunity to feel like they were kind of important too, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and before I go to the next slide, one thing even has been done for AOJ here is if you can go as an instructor, flip it and go to one of the other locations. And so I know that's been going on for many years, which is another best practice if your schedule allows for it, of course.
Right. Yeah. So right there in the photo is Dr. Garrett Huck. The course we're working with is RHS 401, and Amy is on the Beam robot. You can see her photo there. So he's doing some cross-campus collaborations. So the students are doing presentations using the Beam robot. They're actually practicing today, so a little bit later this afternoon. Hopefully will go well. But he's kind of matched them up so that they are groups between Wilkes-Barre and Hazleton. They're doing virtual meetings, and we are very fortunate in that Hazleton and Wilkes-Barre have what I call a collaboration station. So basically a monitor. I know they have laptops. If the students wouldn't have a laptop, they could borrow, and then they can plug it in, connect via Zoom like we're doing right now, and have their group meetings. So we didn't have to purchase any additional equipment or, work with the students really to get them familiar with the technology. Zoom is, very easy to use, and so that's how they're meeting virtually for practicing for their presentations. And then the students at Wilkes-Barre are going to be driving the Beam robot like Amy is in this photo to be part of the presentation group at Hazleton. So they'll be able to walk around the room and talk to folks as they're doing their team presentations. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the community of inquiry. And this model was developed by Garrison, Anderson, and Archer. And the framework is really about a process of creating deep and meaningful learning experience through development of three interdependent elements, which you see there in the diagram. So social presence, cognitive presence, and teaching presence. And just real quick, Amy and I have provided a whole bunch of resources in the e-learning Canvas space. Amy, I'm not sure if Elaine is in there or Roxanne.
I'm going to add you to
that. Add them to that. But so if you're interested in this, there's lots of resources and links there. But I'll just talk a little bit about social presence. So really what that means is that you have a welcoming environment for the students. In the online environment, this could look like, an opportunity for students to kind of introduce themselves. And as the instructor, providing an introduction of yourself. So maybe doing a video to let your students know your expectations, kind of give them some background. I know when I was working with World Campus, we had a faculty member that actually brought her dog into the video and was like, hey, this is, my dog, and just really made it personalized. So that was really nice. So examples for students would include, like we've been talking about, encouraging collaboration between students, establishing a supportive role of the instructors so they know how to reach you and how to get in touch. In terms of cognitive presence, it's really about having students, presenting them with opportunity to integrate key concepts from what you're doing in class and discussions, and then helping them make connections to prior knowledge, applying their new ideas, setting the climate up for learning, and also kind of finding diverse sources when you're working through content. So just really helping bridge gaps and make connections. And then teaching presence is really about creating a learning experience for the students that you help them kind of guide them through the course materials, reinforce key concepts, and it gets into also student engagement. So not just kind of presenting content, but giving them opportunities to actually do things and become active learners. So some things that might come out of that in terms of teaching presence would be focusing a discussion among the students, sharing what your personal meaning is of a concept, and encouraging collaboration. So you can kind of see how they overlap as well. I think Amy's actually drawing that.
I did.
Yeah.
Now I lost my computer mouse.
Oh.
There we go. Oh, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. You can go ahead. Okay, and so then we're kind of going to transition. We're talking about community of learners and ways to find engagement. So Amy, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, so one interesting story that I had was, although we try to get dialogue and discussion in all of our courses, a student at Berks, there's this app challenge. So they created an app of how to get study partners and say, hey, I want a study buddy, and do it that way. And I was like, well, why do you need that? You have you're part of a small campus, like your class size is only like 30 for this upper level. Why would you do such a thing? And so they said, well, we're mainly commuters, we do have some dorms, but when I go to class, I don't talk to anybody. I just go on my phone and I kind of go or have the earbuds on and walk from class to class. And he said, I don't really know the people in my cohort. Like, yes, we talk as part of class discussion, but that's kind of about it. And you hit the ground. And I'm like, that's interesting and weird. And that would be a really interesting research study. But we really want to, outside of class time, have them work together and talk and not be disengaged and on their phone. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well. So that's kind of our ideal thing to go forward. So we want to hear from you first. We're going to take another 2 minutes. And again, for the online audience, if you just want to chat amongst yourselves, you could even talk if you want. And here too, so how do you establish community early and often in your class? It doesn't have to be a shared course. It could just be one of your regular courses that you're teaching. So I'm going to, again, mute on our end and take a minute or two to discuss.
hands.
Come on, there we go. Okay, great. So I'm going to give an opportunity. I know Hal hasn't had a chance to respond, but Margaret or Veronica, would you like to talk about what you posted? If you don't, that's fine.
No, I can talk. I'm okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so basically what I wrote was that to kind of get everybody working in a group. And what I try to do is basically, I do this in my in-person groups, especially like in auditing. So we have like a case study and they're supposed to read the case before coming to class, which doesn't always happen. But then they kind of discuss the question and as a group, and then they present like the answer to their question or what they think the case, the main purpose of the case. And then they actually talk to one another, and then they're more likely to work in a group going forward, and then they become friends. And then they're more apt to help each other if they're stuck on homework and such. So that's worked pretty well for me in the past and this semester too.
Great, fantastic.
My favorite experience was when I was teaching a video course at 2 distant campuses, and it was really labor intensive, but the course was Bible as Literature, and I set up with a professor from Catholic University to lead a tour of Old Testament art in the National Gallery in like from 11 to 12:30, and then we had lunch, and then we went to the commemorative exhibition based on the King James Version of the Bible at the Folger. So the Folger Shakespeare Library. So it was a great opportunity to meet the students and to, force them to pair up with people that they didn't know from their own campus over lunch. And the only thing that was disappointing was that the kids from Mont Alto had to leave early because the van that they had used was needed to take another group to Walmart that night. And that was my reaction too. But what do you do? We got most of the day together.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then for those who don't know, so Lehigh Valley and Berks is about like an hour apart, and so Mont Alto is pretty far. But that way, I put in the comments that it was nice that they met at the National Gallery, because that way it's equidistant, like from Mont Alto to DC and Allentown and Berks, or Lehigh Valley and Berks to DC. So that was really good.
Right.
Great.
Right.
Yeah, so then here, I'm going to flip the camera, so you're going to be on camera. But what did you guys talk about? Anybody wanting to share? Thanks. Marilyn, you could do it too.
Oh, yeah, Marilyn.
We talked about a lot of different things, what each instructor actually preferred, basically really creating that community through more personalization, in which you kind of mentioned kind of giving a little bit more information about yourself and kind of revealing some things about yourself to make you more of, I think, like a real person, someone that's just not my instructor, that I can actually relate to that person. And I think that you kind of agreed with that also, because again, you're trying to make sure that you have that relationship with the students, and having such a small campus area, you start to really get to know those students much more on a personal level, so that you can make groupings and know who's going to work with who, or who would like maybe this pairing might actually, something wonderful might come of the work that they're doing together. So I thought it was very interesting to see the differences, but the similarities between the two ladies here.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful, great discussion. So those are all fantastic ideas and work really well. Just to have some things that tend to bubble up and to give real life examples of saying that things that a faculty that I've worked with have actually implemented. So one is called the working syllabus. Another one is called Today We Will. Everybody pretty much does icebreakers, but how do you do them across campus? And then study group activities. So we have all these links again in the resources, so you don't have to write them down. But what a working or learning center syllabus is you give an extra rationale for courses and assignments, not just, hey, we're doing this, but it shows the relatability. In addition, you could have shared decision making. So maybe you want homework assignments due Sundays at 9 p.m., but all the students do a lot of working on the weekend. So they might say, hey, can we have it due Mondays at 5 p.m.? And so getting them to decide helps foster community among themselves as well. And then you could give yourself some warnings of potential pitfalls and recommendations for staying on track. And then lastly is an opportunity for students to set instructor expectations. And that way you could have this back and forth with equitable expectations of the instructor. So of course students might say, oh, I want you to respond to email until 11 o'clock at night. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen. We have busy lives. But you could say, hey, the students want you to respond to email within 48 hours. That's pretty reasonable. And that way it's not you just stating it in the syllabus, it's coming from the students, which helps them, again, foster that relationship with you, but also with the other students in the class because they're coming up with those ideas together. So here's an example of what that looks like. I know it's very small in the room because of the projector size, but some of the faculty responsibilities that were determined they wanted to make sure that there was no surprises, like no pop quizzes. This was when we had Angel, but used the Angel calendar, which required some setup, like putting little due dates. And Canvas, it's automatically done for you, which is really, really nice. To be personable and to speak more slowly. So this instructor tends to talk pretty fast. So she made it a point in her focus area to say, hey, okay, I'm going to talk a little bit slower. And she did that. So that's one example. Another area is called Today We Will. For this, and I have a picture, your classroom is kind of your little bubble, your environment. You set the stage of how their classroom is going to interact with each other. So promoting that focus doesn't happen in isolation. It's something so simplistic. You might put an agenda or a PowerPoint for the day up on the board, but instead of saying just the agenda, if you say today we will, and just put like what we're going to do together as a class today, like we are going to achieve this, we are doing this. And just the simplest thing of saying we as a whole really help change the environment. So I couldn't find the research. This is just a regular article about doing it, but there was one research study that was done with this that they compared just regular agenda items and today we will, and the we will did so much, like not so much better, but better, and there was more dialogue and more communication. So something simple, not time consuming, and has a lot of good outcomes. And if you have any questions in the chat, please put them at any time. I am looking at it. So we won't do a think, pair, share, but what icebreakers have you used in your classes? Or maybe you haven't, and that's okay. But maybe you might say why you haven't. Is anybody willing to share?
I can share. It's Veronica.
Okay, go ahead.
We did one in our World Campus class where it was like a scavenger hunt type of deal where people had to kind of guess where people were located. But the one I liked the most, I did in an advanced auditing class, and basically the students had to prepare a PowerPoint about themselves, but with no words, just pictures, and then do like a voiceover. You could probably use VoiceThread, and kind of tell us a little bit about themselves. And you got to see pictures of what's important to them, and you got to hear their voice. And then people had to discuss, like, I didn't even ask for the students to do it, but they actually discussed amongst each other, oh, hey, I have this interest in cooking and this gourmet cooking. And it was really interactive and fun. And then everybody seemed to view the PowerPoints quite a bit. So I thought that was pretty neat.
That's great. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay, so I just gave some examples that I've used, or yeah, it's the icebreaker, the game. So one thing is like best and worst classes. What were some of the best classes you took and why? What were some of the worst classes you took and why? And you could kind of mingle and kind of share out. And that way, when they share out, we say, don't say the class, but say why you did it, like why you didn't like it, why you liked it. And that way it helps set the stage. There's another one called speed dating, which again, you could have them, if it's cross campus, that way everybody could maybe be on Zoom one time, and then you could break them out and do it that way. Or you could do it like VoiceThread, which was what Veronica said, is like say what are you afraid of, what makes you laugh, and then look at everybody's. One that I wanted to say, just in case we had some people who don't teach in shared programs, that I find to be the best. So for my first year seminar courses, I did this, is 4 corners. So this is not for shared programs, but like what season do you like? Do you like winter? Go up here. If you like spring, go up there. If you like summer, there. Fall, there. And then people go and spread out, and then you talk about it. And then you put up another question that's completely random, like what film genre do you like the best and why? Like horror and drama. And it really gets people talking. Out of every icebreaker, that's probably the most I've gotten my freshman seminar students to talk. So I really like that one. And then Mime Down the Alley. This one, I had a peer mentor, and she was adamant about doing it. And I was like, oh, this kind of sounds pretty silly. I don't know, but I'll let you do it. And again, this is not for a shared course. So you line up students in tens, and then you basically just pass it down the alley. And so you have to not just whisper, but you actually have to act it out in mimes. So it gets them to really open up right away. And I was afraid about the shy students not wanting to do that. So I asked later on, they said, we were afraid at first, but like that's probably one of the best icebreakers we've ever had. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. So, so the last 2 4 corners and Mime Down the Alley are not for shared programs, but I did want to talk about that. Okay, so for study groups, they help, of course, promote collaboration, informal study groups. To encourage students to do this, you can make it as an option with guidance and give suggestions of how students can meet, especially across campus, and offer guidelines for sessions. And 2, you could demonstrate the value of doing it, the value of having it be cross campus, offer proof that it works, and also, of course, you can invite incentives. So for the one course, they said, hey, if you do a write-up and say that you met and what you covered, and you verify, show proof that you've met up together, that you get a bonus point. So we're not going to do it today, but if you want to practice, this was started at a presentation last week. But if you say, okay, Zoom, you have to create an account, you have to log in, and you might not know where it is. There's tools where you could draw on the whiteboard and do video that's on the fly. One example is called Stoodle. And so you basically don't have to create an account, go to stoodle.com and say, I want a room. You get this long web address, and then you could send it to your classmates and say, hey, check your email, click on the link. Then it opens up this whiteboard, and you can all draw and collaborate, share your screen, even talk and do audio just right there. Another one that's more video based is called join.me. Again, you don't have to create an account. You just go to that and then say, hey, log in, go to a computer, click on this web address, and then boom, we're all there together. So some other extra incentives. So I said that first one is register and report sessions of who, what, when, and write a short paper of experience. If everyone in the group scores above a certain level on the exam, then everybody in the group gets a bonus point. So if everybody gets and 85% showing that they studied, then they get an even extra bonus point. So encourage that study collaboration. You could allow them to take one quiz as a group, and whatever the group gets, that's what everybody does. And then people who choose not to be in the group just get their individual grades. Or you could have them, if you meet as a group, you get the bonus of submitting a exam question that could be used. And that way, if they get it right on the test, then they get a bonus point or something like that. So a little bit out of the box, but if you're interested in any of these, we're more than happy to work with you and do that. So enough of talking. We do have another Think, Pair, Share. So how do you, once you establish community, how do you continue it throughout the semester? And some of it might be the same thing that we had talked about, so we won't spend as much time. But how do you continue that relationship of you being connected to the students and students connected to each other? So again, I'm going to mute us and give you about a minute or two, and we'll get back together.
Discuss how did it match up to your expectations? You know, did you learn something that you didn't think you would know? You know, just to kind of compare and get that feedback. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to stop. Just for time's sake, I'm going to quickly talk what was done online and then maybe a quick synopsis of it in the room. So for some of the online ones, Hal said if you have consistency, sometimes there's burnout. So having a variety of activities and having that change up. Margaret had a great idea, which we had talked about earlier, is if you could midpoint of the semester, try to go to the other campus and teach from there. But let's say you can't, just like Garrett Hubkent, Dr. Hubkent, Margaret was able to have office hours on a day that she could be there, and then she enticed students with pizza that was paid for by their local campus. That's the little heads hasten to ask part. And then two, another one for more so for online was Veronica, and she said just having them continue with new collaborations and interacting with different members of the class instead of having the same group throughout the whole semester. So all fantastic ideas. Thank you very much for all those. And one thing that I had missed earlier was Margaret's suggestion for icebreakers. And she had share something about yourself, an achievement that you're proud of, and share a family name story, especially for a literature class, like your history for the name, either your first or last nickname, why you have that name within your family, and a couple of others. So those are all great ideas. So in the room, is anybody willing to share out what you discussed?
We've mostly talked about checking in. I think that was the essence of how could I help your experience be better was a question, or how do you learn best was a way to stay connected. Initially, and then a check-in at the end of the semester also too, saying were your expectations met? Did you get what you wanted? And then also along the journey, one of the things that we talked about was a couple weeks into class, what's working for you about this class and what's not working, or what can we do better? Understanding there's some things that are set, but that the students have often reported that as a respectful stance, that they felt respected and that the teacher cared about their opinions.
Yeah.
And then the things that can be tweaked, like you said, due dates on Tuesdays instead of Sundays. You can't, those things can be adjusted. So we talked about some of those strategies.
That's fantastic. So for an online class, like if you're afraid that students won't say those out loud, you could have the people, and instead of having like a write on a piece of paper before you leave the room, you could have a quick little one question Canvas survey that's anonymous and collect that information that way. And another thing that's used a lot is in most of our courses, we try to do a mid-semester survey that's anonymous. And that way, if there are things you could address it, and then tell your class that you did that. And then for the ones that you can't, tell them why you can and what you hope to change for the next cohort. So the Schreyer Institute for Teaching Excellence did some research about the mid-semester surveys. And they said, if you do that, you tend to get higher SRTE scores, and you tend to get more written feedback on your SRTEs. Which is really interesting in my mind. And that was done about, I think, 6 years ago. So it's a little bit outdated, but it's still relevant. So some things, connections to you're already doing it. So being available, having your office hours, some informal discussion prior to class to both sets of students. Calling out students by name, of course, and then student relationships is part of your service to the university. Maybe Dr. Huck gets a group of students at Hazleton to go to the Salvation Army and volunteer on Thursdays throughout the whole semester. And so he has good connection to some Hazleton students that are remote where he teaches at Wilkes-Barre. So that's one good way. And then I'm not going to go over this, but one thing that we talked about in session one was the Think, Pair, Share, which we tried to model today, and reporting out. Sometimes you say, okay, people online, you're being very quiet. Who wants to talk online? You still might get silence. So how do you draw them out? So one way is this popsicle stick method of saying, hey, we're going to have you in groups. What campus is going to answer? So one, I'm just going to do the ones for AOJ here. So 1 is Shenango, 2 is Beaver, 3 is Greater Allegheny. So you say, okay, number 3, Greater Allegheny. Of those students, if it's a small class, you can each give them a number or pull out a name, and that way it draws them out, kind of that randomization. And then lastly, maybe ABCD cards or that polling that we had talked about. So I don't want to kind of repeat everything. So I'm going to give some ideas. So we talked about polling in an earlier session, but I'm going to show you 2 things that we haven't, 2 examples of polling that we haven't. Then we're going to talk about conversation starters, group work, mindfulness techniques, and then what's called the NESI framework. So one polling software is called Slido. and we're going to be doing that. And it's nice because it gives you a theme to gauge students, kind of formative assessment. With this, we don't have students create an account, so it's not collecting data, but just kind of saying, hey, what's your pulse? So there's many different ones. I know some I mentioned yesterday. And so I'm going to briefly go over them. So one thing is called Google Forms. And this way, if we're saying, hey, I like to do a pop quiz, or I like to do a quiz in class, they all have computers. But if not, they have their cell phones. And if they have Wi-Fi, you could have them take a little poll during class. And if you move to Canvas, you could do this for Canvas too. And then from there, they take this and you get instantaneous kind of pie chart results that are in real time. And that way you could say, hey, okay, I thought students understood this concept and I wasn't going to cover it today, but now I know right away here and there that I need to cover it during class, because if not, they're going to struggle on the next assignment and do that. Flubaroo is an add-on to Google Forms where you could actually get the results and grade it. And because if a form is like a survey and you have to manually grade everything, but this is a nice kind of example. So I just wanted to kind of introduce it, not go over it in detail. But if you're interested in any of these, please let us know. Another one, there's two, it's called Quizzes and Kahoot. It's kind of game-based. So the movies around my area have this before the movie starts. They say, okay, who is the actor in this movie? And then if you win, you get like a free popcorn or something like that. And so it's used a lot in K through 12 education. And so I was like, okay, well, a faculty member wanted to kind of have this quiz dynamic and didn't want the polls. So we did something like this. And so if you're in session 1, we use this tool for yours. So just to show you the kind of how-to is, again, you'd say go to quizzes.com on your phone, and this is a picture of my phone. You enter a code that's given to you, you type in your name, and you get this quirky little avatar. So, and then you get a series of questions. So for session 1, we had 4. If you get it right, you get a little meme that's called great job and points. And you might be saying, don't students, isn't that kind of childish? Students love this. Because they see those on the internet, they share them with friends all the time. So I think maybe that's why. And then if they get it wrong, they also get a -1 that goes along with it. So again, kind of quirky, but really students really like it, which is very interesting. And so it has that kind of gaming aspect, because even if you don't have students accountable, you can say, hey, I was ranked #1 versus, oh, I was pretty low. I got to make sure that I study next time. So that's that intrinsic kind of motivation. So we do want to have you practice and kind of see the possibility of these things. So if you do have a phone, actually I don't, it should be up there. If you go to slido.com, and I'm going to put this in the chat, and then enter the code 8232. And if for some reason Slido is not working, we'll go ahead and fix that.
What was the code?
8232. And so for this, and I'll share my screen so that you can see it. We're going to show the results. And again, we're kind of doing a square peg in a round hole right now, because typically we'd all be at the video classrooms, but we'll go ahead and do this. Oh, it didn't remember me. And we're gonna share the results. So if you go to slido.com and answer, and you could have multiple correct answers or input. So of the people who say, I want to connect with my students, how am I going to be available? So 100% of you have done email or LMS. For online chat or email, it's 80%. For an office phone, 60%. But then the infamous cell phone, we had talked about this yesterday. So 40% of you have done that. And then two other things like online chat, some faculty, which I don't think I would, is maybe like Facebook Messenger. They say, okay, I could do that. Or there's different apps called like GroupMe or WhatsApp. They have done that. And then cell phone to text is 20%. So it's pretty interesting. And to show you an alternative is what we're going to be doing next. There we go. So as far as some other ideas, one thing is doing a conversation starter. So again, just random times throughout the semester, say, hey, okay, let's talk about it. Like, what's your favorite color? Share one thing about yourself. What's your favorite song? And get together and talk. And then another one is maybe before class for video conferencing is have them do a 2-minute survey where they rank their understanding generically on the course. Are they getting it? Are they not? Are they struggling? And then put one thing you don't get, one thing you get, and then use that as a dialogue as part of the class session the next time. And then Julie had talked about collaboration stations. So this is one example, and then the place is escaping me at the time. I think this might be Mont Alto or New Kensington. So Hal, maybe if you know this, if you see it as familiar, maybe that's why, but it is there. So these are becoming more popular among Penn State libraries where they have a way to connect in and just do things. Is there any here?
Yeah, we
Okay.
have a room like that.
That's fantastic, that's good. Oh, Julie's not feeling very well, hence why she wasn't here, so I'm gonna have to take her slide, so she apologizes for that. And then Margaret said, well, what about Skype? Skype is another great tool to meet up with students, and they're familiar with it. There's something that they tend to use a lot. And so for the group work, talking about that join.me, so the students could get together at a campus and say, hey, we're gonna connect to 2 other students. And that way they're still in those little cohorts of students together. So mindfulness techniques. Did anyone attend the Schreier workshop on mindfulness? Maybe about a month ago? I'll let everybody, I'll wait to see about online. If you haven't, that's okay. Okay, so the one instructional designer at Penn State York has really done this for first year seminar to help with resistance to dropping out of college, trying to retain the students at Penn State York from first year to second year. So they did this a lot and tried to get some of their courses, and they had faculty meetups to do this. So she presented of how to do this in their classroom over to the instructional designers over the summer, and she had a presentation for faculty about a month ago through the Schreier Institute. So 3 quick techniques are 10 generic I am statements. So fill out the rest of the sentence. So I am kind, I am, you can say silly things like I'm scared of this course. It's up to the students. And that way, if they have them fill out a sheet of paper and read about it, it helps them with the connections. Generating a positive emotion has found to help with connection and help students with grit. And so It says, say 3 good things that are going on in your life. We tend to not share them out. And so when we did this over the summer for the instructional designers, it was like, oh, I didn't know that so-and-so was going, had this great thing going for them. So the instructional designer at Fayette is going for her doctorate and is almost there, which is amazing. And I didn't know that, and helping those connections. What are you grateful for? Name something you're proud of. And then one thing that's kind of like the icebreaker is fast friends. It's that speed dating thing. So there's all these resources, and I believe the recording to her session is at this website, which we'll also have in Canvas for you. And I know that a lot of people from Greater Allegheny faculty really liked it. So they said, hey, can we get her to come over here and present? So who knows, maybe we'll have the follow-up session for that. So does anybody want to share? You don't have to, but does anybody want to share what are 3 good things, or what are you grateful for, or name something that you're proud of? It's okay if you don't. I'll see online. I'll give about a couple, 10 more seconds. Good, Margaret, you should be so proud of that. So she says, I'm proud that I figured out the audio and video of this conference. So that's fantastic, because she had trouble the last time. That's perfect. Anybody else? Oh, that's so cute. I'm grateful for your help and support. So hopefully I'll come visit you soon, Margaret. And then I guess for me, I'm grateful for being close with my family and being able to help them and support them. Like I even am close to my grandmother's brothers and sisters, so I get to see them on a pretty regular basis and help them out. So that's what I'm grateful for. Okay, so here we go. So the NESTE framework is the National Survey of Student Engagement. This is something that Julie has done a lot of work with. There also is a counterpart within our group who does a lot of research for World Campus courses, trying to make sure that there's engagement in online courses. So Veronica, I think you'd be interested in that. And for your class, you might have had this as part of it. So they're collecting more and more for World Campus, seeing if what they're doing is engaging students in an online environment. So this is now being done for kind of shared courses and for blended courses, hybrid courses, and saying, hey, are we treating students equitably and engaging them at the same level, both in person, in the same room, and those who are at the distant locations? It includes, it's basically a survey and a ranking scale, and we are still kind of collecting some data and seeing where it goes, but it'll be neat to see some of the results and how to engage some things and to keep track. So I think most of the things that are on here, one thing that a lot of the instructional designers say at Penn State is good teaching is good teaching no matter what the modality. So if there's a faculty member who says, oh, online learning, that's so much worse than face-to-face. Well, are you comparing apples to apples? For the online course, if it's just read these PowerPoint slides, do this assignment, you would never just completely lecture. You would engage the students and talk to them and have discussions. So are you really comparing it? So most of these ideas that are on the next slide are geared for online, but were tailored for online, but are really applicable for all classes. So some ideas and some of the questions are, do you participate in discussions on a regular basis? Have you had the opportunity to share your knowledge with the learning community? Have you interacted with students in teams? So yes, this could be part of the survey, but these are good ideas to think about your class, or maybe during the summer when you have more time to redesign your class or to tweak it. these are some ideas that you might want to do. Are they doing hands-on practice and applying it to the working world? Do they assess peers on team-based assignments? So Margaret said earlier about that's how she has some discussion, is they peer review all their literature papers through discussions. And then have you used technology to communicate with the instructor and class peers? Have you made a presentation to the class? And some others is there clear expectations? Are you part of a supportive, safe learning environment? Is there illustration and examples for course content? Is it relatable to the real world? Participate in discussion. So Hal said earlier about changing the activities, having more discussion. So here's another great example for that. And then some others fall in the category of kind of status and reflection. And this kind of goes to that mindfulness and thinking about the course. So were you given prompt, meaningful feedback? Were you given your grades so you knew where you stood? Were you motivated for the subject matter? So for occupational therapy, it's the ones that are majors, but for maybe lower level courses, it might your enthusiasm might entice them to switch into that major. And then just reflecting on learning and the experience of learning, because I think, and we've heard this before, there's a lot of ideas that are out there saying the jobs that we're preparing students for today don't exist yet. So we have to teach them kind of how to learn and apply the concepts. So these kind of fall into that category.
I need to excuse myself.
Yeah.
Class, so
Oh yeah,
I'm
go
gonna be
ahead.
rude and walk out.
No. No, that's fine. And then here's some questions about did you establish community? And so here's some questions that guide you for that process. And lastly, are there variations of preparedness and culture? And you might be saying, oh, we only got 10 minutes left. But the reason for this is it's most of the things that we already covered in session 3, which was flipping the classroom. So student preparedness, this is not a location by location example. It is really, you could have it among a department at the same campus location. Do they know the prerequisite knowledge? Do they do the readings? Do they do the pre-class work? What is their time expectations? So if for another class, maybe the rigor wasn't there and they were able to skim by and maybe only attend class and maybe do an hour of homework each week. But as we know for Penn State courses, you should be spending about 7.5 hours a week for a 3-credit course. So having that be on the same page. And then for culture, maybe you might have one talkative group versus another. Again, this could be just one class section versus another at the same place. But what happens if you have a shared course and one location is very quiet, another is very talkative, just like you might have students in the class where you have a talkative group and an untalkative group. How do you address that? Same thing with extensions and extra credit. There might be the perception that, oh, everybody does extensions, everybody does extra credit. How do you do that? And then levels of respect to everybody and textbook approaches. And thank you, Margaret, for that, liking that one visual. And here, it muddies the water. Some of these could certainly move from one listing to the other and vice versa. So why you should address it, going back to that bubble, it's one class. You have to teach them how to learn. Of course, you can't force them to get together and talk, but you could be a motivator to do that. So for the prerequisite knowledge, if they're not understanding something, some people say, oh, like they should just know it, it's their fault for not knowing it, and they try to avoid those. You shouldn't. You should have that be a discussion amongst everybody and provide benchmarks. A lot of people say, oh, just go to the tutoring center, the learning center. But if you frame it a different way, they're more apt to. So if you just keep saying it, just go to the tutoring center, learning center, they may not do it. But if you incorporate it, like you have the second one, you have a quiz, and then say, hey, you got below an 80%. These are ways to improve your score for the test. Go to the learning center and ask them to help you review X, Y, Z. You could, as part of a beginning of a class, have a quiz of the prerequisite knowledge and give them resources to prepare. So especially even for like Spanish courses, Spanish 2, they might not have covered like a topic like the verb gustar. So you might not cover it, but that way you give them resources and expect it for them to renew it. And then another way is for an assignment, not a quiz, you mark things incorrect, incomplete, or inadequate, and then you charge them to fix it and give them some resources to find that correct information. Again, this is from the session 3 of the e-learning series, so we're not going to cover it, but in case you haven't, I have it at the end of the presentation slides. But for reading and the textbook purchase and the pre-class work, it's setting those expectations, holding them accountable, and then how to handle underprepared students when they don't do the work, or some of them don't. So for time's sake, since it took a little bit more to go back and forth, maybe we could just, if there's any volunteers. So what strategies do you have to get them to read and do pre-class work in advance? So don't go to Slido, but just type it in. Oh, thank you, Veronica. We don't have anybody. So for purchasing textbooks, sometimes it costs a lot. So providing alternatives, there's lots of open educational resources. There's a thing called OpenStax. So for anatomy and physiology, people who said, I can't afford the textbook, it might be on reserve at the library, but we say, hey, we want you to buy the book, but if you can't, here's a free PDF at OpenStax that covers most of the same concepts. There might be some things that are missing, but at least it's better than nothing. You can hold them accountable, and on Tuesday there was a Schreier workshop on how to get students to read, and so they said if you give them a quiz on the content, of course we know that, but they said something that's really profound. If you give them something to read, then give them something to write. You don't have to grade it, but have them write it out and check it, maybe randomly, or have it be like a check or check minus. Giving them the power of choice, which Hal had said earlier, which is a great thing. Saying you have an alternative of doing a writing assignment, or maybe creating a little brief presentation about something. And then lastly is a thing called exam wrappers. And there's an example of this at the next slide. So an exam wrapper, here's one of them, is saying, okay, for this exam, what was one topic that you were curious about that we didn't cover in this area? What topics that were on the exam mattered to you? What questions do you wish you could answer that you didn't get to, and why? And then another one is called PDIQ, which is saying how many hours did you study for this test? What grade do you think you're going to get? And that way you can compare the answers, saying, hey, for those of you who studied 7 hours, you got A's. For those of you who crammed the night before and only did 30 minutes, you got C's, and you have that as well. And one other thing, this was done at the East. So Margaret, you might have seen this for Dr. Karen Cackley for biology. As what grades do you want students to achieve? We assume students want to get that A, but maybe they are taking a lot of courses and are working. So maybe they do want to strive for only that B or that C. So there's a whole book about this, but this performance prognosis indicator says that if you want to get a B, you should be doing 6 or 9 of these things on the left-hand side. So you should attend all lectures, review concepts, make flashcards, do homework, etc. So that gives them a basis for studying. Margaret says, for an online class, have the quiz unlock the rest of the content for the lesson. That's fantastic. Yep. I did not have that, but Canvas makes that so much easier than Angel. And then this video is very cute. I suggest that you watch it. It says, like, how do I get my grade? I'm failing the class. It's week 13. How can I get a B and pass this class? But he didn't do anything along the way. So you could have, there's no extra credit for the class. You're kind of done. So setting the expectations in advance in the syllabus, saying that you won't have extra credit, and you won't allow exam retakes or something like that. Having a quiz on to making sure that they understand that, so they have to take the syllabus quiz to get access to the rest of the course is used a lot. And then what I talked about before is the PDIQ and that mid-semester survey we talked about earlier. But another one is the explanation of the grade book. Students think their grade might be inflated. They think, oh, I currently have a C, I can miss this test. Well, a test is worth a lot more points than what they currently have. So similar things, you think they understand it, but they don't. But if you do explain it, it really helps them. And then talkative versus untalkative is drawing them out, things we had talked about in an earlier session, and giving them encouragement and feedback. So again, similar ideas that we had talked about from time to time. And then lastly, for respect, netiquette. Has anybody heard of netiquette? No?
Yes.
Good. So netiquette is kind of this online etiquette, but setting up that etiquette expectations. We have some things that you can just copy and paste, and it's in the resources for you. And some things that we talked about earlier with that working syllabus and saying, hey, what are your etiquette expectations, and letting students kind of define those and saying, here are the 10 rules of etiquette, but having that be a conversation. So for the e-learning series, it is now done, but we do want to quickly take the time to say that this is not the end. We do have course design support. So if you have a course that's new, it's typically on our radar, but if you want help and we don't reach out to you, reach out to us. We're here to help you, and we're here to be available. We try to collaborate with local IDs. So I know in Kensington we have Deborah Stillman, so we try to keep them in the loop. And we really want to help you and do what we can. And then lastly, I'm not going to go over this, I'm going to go straight to this, is we have the TLT Reach project. So we have a call for putting in proposals right now. So if you're interested in the Reach project, you do get travel funds to come to University Park if you want. If you don't want to, that's fine and dandy. You get dedicated support, more so than just Marilyn and I. You get multimedia specialists, whatever you want. And if you want a technology toolkit, one at Harrisburg was Mike Chorney. He got an iPad and a stylus to write chemical equations. That's there too. So if you're interested, or if you want to learn more, email us and we'll talk about it and go from there. So that's everything. I think there might be a class in here because I see people out there. So if there are any questions, please email me, and thank you everybody so much.